I think it'd be helpful if people treated black people the way they would treat white people. Part of what we require is real moral imagination, the real effort, the real genuine effort to try to see in each other something like a person, like a genuine, real person.
Let me say about the Middle East, you may be sick and tired of the Middle East, but the Middle East is not sick and tired of you.
And I feel extremely sorry for my colleagues in the French security service for not having prevented the recent attacks in France. But the problem has really been that the Belgian security service is very poor. Not to put too fine a point on it, they're useless.
Hamilton, from the moment it hit its first audience at the public, was hitting a group of people who didn't know how desperate they were to feel patriotic again. That's the vibe that one feels from the audience every night now at the Rogers. You can love America without hating other people, without hating immigrants, without hating Muslims. You can actually, everything that's good about America is inclusive.
For each day we lived with a dark nuclear cloud hanging over our heads, threatening no less than the end of civilization.
Imagine in a few years' time we have a domestic robot. You know, one day we're late home from work, we call up the robot and say, you know, can you make dinner for the kids? I'm not going to be home until 8 o'clock. And the robot goes to the fridge and there's nothing there. And then it sees the cat. And it says, well, you know, I could go down to the supermarket and do the shopping and come back and do the cooking, but I can't really leave the house because the kids are too small to be left by themselves. And so I'll just cook the cat for dinner.
Our cancer screening efforts are creating more problems than they solve. Doctors aren't sure which things will or will not matter, so we intervene on all of them. And that can cause real problems, even death.
They asked a grandmaster a little while back how he would prepare for a match against a computer, and he said, "I'd bring a hammer." And there are two tectonic forces at work. There's globalization and there's tech progress. Tech progress is going to dwarf globalization going forward. The robots are going to work cheaper than the Chinese fairly quickly.
Henry Kissinger and I will boil down 5,000 years of Chinese history into a few pithy sound bites. We will enable you to impress your neighbors. If you want to hear about Chinese food culture and pandas, go elsewhere. If you want to understand why President Xi Jinping lives in mortal terror of becoming a Chinese Gorbachev, join Dr. Kissinger and me on Saturday.
The NCAA is one of the worst organizations in the United States. The labor force are the players. They get nothing. Men's basketball and college football players should be paid.
I think Joe's plan would be okay if it weren't, 1, bad for universities, 2, bad for sports, and 3, bad for the athletes, right? Other than that, it's fine.
The threats to this country are on the rise. But what does that mean? Why don't we have that conversation now?
A patient that had been diagnosed with leukemia that was being treated was about to pass. And Watson declared on its own that that was not what was wrong with this patient. That was not the proper treatment. The doctor changed the treatment, and that patient now is alive and well.
There's a prince, and his name is Charles. I could be a prince. And I just start to watch every single thing that he does. It all became theater to me. Life became theater. And that all I had to do to become someone was to behave like someone.
If I want to go home and tell my 10-year-old grandson that we now have discovered gravitational waves, how do I tell him or her what the significance is?
There's a whole side of the universe that we've never seen before. We want to learn about that. So for the first time now in human history, we have the ability to explore the warped side of the universe, explore black holes.
What is the biggest policy mistake each of you individuals have made
over your careers?
See, it takes a lot of thought to come up with it. Another question?
I hope that we don't all have to believe that the contemporary artists will be entrusted to save the old masters in some way. The notion that anything can only be interesting if it's seen through the lens of this moment of contemporary production, I hope we don't get there.
Putin is a bad guy. He's also a very smart guy. The combination is awful. People think, you know, we're going to supply the Ukrainians with more arms. We're going to put a battalion into the Baltic states. That isn't going to do it. We have to step back and realize that even though Russia is dangerous in these areas, we also have common interests with Russia.
This is an amazing insight. In other words, the fact that she finds that the indifference that she feels is actually sexually thrilling to her.
Yes, but I think that's true of moralists. I think
Yes.
that
Yeah.
I think that indifference is a moralist's vacation spot.
Okay.
Well said.
These kinds of technologies over time could open the door to all kinds of possibilities for all the rest of us as well. Imagine a future where we can learn very complex tasks or languages in a flash. A future where we might be able to connect with each other in completely and radically new ways.
There's no other mammal on the planet that consumes milk. And you gotta respect the person that someday looked at a cow and said, I'm gonna squeeze that, and whatever comes out, I'm gonna drink that. You don't need milk. Where maybe 1% of the population of this country has celiac disease, but something like 25% of people these days are on a gluten-free diet.
That great New Yorker cartoon, it's just been a week that I've given up gluten, but I'm already more annoying.
Yeah. And so the evidence that says artificial sweeteners cause cancer is absolutely wrong. In fact, what we proved over time and what we learned is that rats get cancer. If you give rats anything, they get cancer. If you give them vitamin C in huge amounts, they get cancer.
I'm all for abandoning the word feminist because I don't know what it means. I think that we spend a little bit too much time thinking about labels and not really thinking about what's really going on and where do our daughters have to go to continue to progress.
Small restaurant called ZZ's Clam Bar. And the bouncer, who's just doing a job, appears, this giant guy, and he goes, "You're done here." I tell him, I said, "Well, okay, I'd like to pay for the meal." He goes, "You're done here." I said it 5 times. "I'd like to pay for the meal. You're done here. You're done here." And I said, "Okay, we're done here." It was really quite enjoyable.
Really fun.
But the last thing we couldn't do was think about altering genes in situ in human cells. And then came CRISPR-Cas9. In 2013, CRISPR-Cas9 was adapted to use in human cells and allows the cutting of DNA at any particular chosen place inside a cell without altering the cell.
I represent, Jane, I think as you know, one of the most diverse districts in the country. It's still a slight majority African American, but they're African American, Caribbean Americans, Latinos, South Asians, the Orthodox Jewish community, Bangladeshi Americans, Turkish Americans, Italian Americans. In fact, I represent more Russian-speaking Jewish immigrants from the former Soviet Union than any other member of Congress in the country. I mean, who knew? Hakeem Jeffries. I mean, what a great country.
So what I'm saying is, you're right. This does not make sense. And I know Hakeem and I, who've been in the wars in Congress, it works when you get a majority, and a majority should be that in the middle. The right and the left working together, setting aside differences, seeing how we can go forward incrementally to ultimately get where we want to go.
When's the last time we saw that?
Exactly.
So you're going to have a stalwart representative of the progressive left, Andrew Stern, and a libertarian like me, because we both think that a universal basic income is the way to go. It's actually going to be cheaper than the current system in many ways. It is also going to deal with poverty in ways that have been proved utterly intractable over the last 40 or 50 years, has a chance of revitalizing America's civil society. And in that, we have our best chance to recover one of the signal features of American exceptionalism.
I always open new books at Barnes & Noble's. I look at the first page, and the first thing that comes to mind is, this is nothing like Proust. Nobody can actually measure up to the degree of excellence that Proust sort of encompasses.
We're at altitude of 1 kilometer descending. Standing by for sky crane. Sky crane has started.
Single eyes, you remain strong.
Touchdown confirmed. We're safe on Mars.